good evening. I hope everyone's doing fine tonight. I guess tonight, whatever. It is a bedtime story, so tonight we are going to continue our reading of the English Constitution as written by Walter Bagehot. Sorry, that was my assistant trying to mime something at me from the door. And tonight's English English. Okay, guys, it is a bedtime story, so can we cut it out, please? People are trying to sleep to this, okay? Tonight's bedtime story is brought to you by the Family Law Lobby. In case you want to be able to tell a bedtime story to your children, and you're unable to see your children, the Family Law Lobby can help you. I wouldn't imagine the Family Law Lobby actually having that much business here, but here we are. Anyway, we start on page 28, the third paragraph. These conditions narrowly restrict elective government, but the prerequisites of a cabinet government are rarer still. It demands not only the conditions I have mentioned, but the possibility likewise of a good legislature. A legislature competent to elect a sufficient administration. Now, a competent legislature is very rare. Any permanent legislator at all, any constantly acting mechanism for enacting and repealing laws is, though it seemed to us so natural, quite contrary to the inveterate conceptions of mankind. The great majority of nations conceive of their laws either as something divinely given and therefore unalterable, or as a fundamental habit inherited from the past to be transmitted to the future. The English Parliament, of which the prominent functions are now legislative, was not all so once. It was rather a preservative one. The custom of the realm, the aboriginal transmitted law, the law which was in the breast of the judges, could not be altered without the consent of Parliament, and therefore everybody felt sure it would not be altered except in great, peculiar, and anomalous cases. The valued use of Parliament was not half so much to alter the law as to prevent the laws being altered, and such too was its real use. In early societies, it mattered much more that the law should be fixed than that it should be good. Any law which the people of ignorant times enact is sure to involve many misconceptions and to cause many evils. Perfection in legislation is not to be looked for, and is not, indeed, much wanted in a rude, painful, confined life. But such an age covets fixity, that men should enjoy the fruits of their labor, that the law of property should be known, that the law of marriage should be known, that the whole course of life should be kept in a calculable track, is the summum bonum, and also that's Latin, of early ages, the first desire of semi-civilized mankind. In that age, men do not want to have their laws adapted, but to have their laws steady. The passions are so powerful, forces so eager, the social bonds so weak, that the august spectacle of an all but unalterable law is necessary to preserve it. In the early stages of human society, all change is thought evil, and most change is an evil. The conditions of life are so simple and so unvarying that any decent sort of rules suffice, so long as men know what they are. Custom is the first check on tyranny. That fixed routine of social life at which modern innovations chafe, and by which modern improvements are impeded, is the primitive check on base power. The perception of political expediency has hardly begun. The sense of abstract justice is weak and vague, and a rigid adherence to the fixed mold of transmitted usage is essential to an unmarred, unspoiled, and unbroken life. Now, while we are here, we might as well discuss this real quick. The idea of a fixed law, as Bagehot so states, is actually very important, and it is not only important beginning, right? Yes, it was used by mankind first to preserve order, to bring peace to warring tribes, to civilizations that have suddenly found themselves after the agricultural revolution with extra time that they can use. And therefore, laws bring stability to people's lives. And even today, laws and stability is the fundamental reason why we can progress. The reason that our companies work, the reason that we are able to have this conversation is that for a period of 20, 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, that there was relative peace and relative consistency in the legal system of the world. And because businesses and countries and people could imagine a future for themselves, that gives them the ability and the courage to invest. Stability is necessary. That is important. Let's move on. We can talk about this more later. In such an age, a legislature continuously sitting, always making laws, always repealing laws, would have been both an anomaly and a nuisance. But in the present state of the civilized part of the world, such difficulties are obsolete. There is a diffused desire in civilized communities for an adjusting legislation, for a legislation which should adapt to the inherited laws to the new wants of a world which now changes every day. It has ceased to be necessary to maintain bad laws because it is necessary to have some laws. Civilization is robust enough to bear the incision of legal improvements, but taking history at large, the rarity of cabinets is mostly due to the greater rarity of continuous legislatures. I want to address one comment that has been raised just now. Yes, Bagehot is talking about something slightly different to what I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about essentially the idea that before we as a civilization, even before we as individuals can do anything, we need the stability in our minds to be able to move forward. And this will, I have repeated this ad nauseum by this point, but I will repeat it again. Civilization, just like each individual human, requires a solid foundation before you can invest your company, before you can invest in yourself, right? Think of it as a human body. The human body doesn't know whether it will have food tomorrow. So unless your big brain, your cortex, is able to tell your little brain, your amygdala and your hindbrain, that you will have food tomorrow, and you are able to control it, only then can you make progress towards your own future. Otherwise, you will be beset by doubts, beset by anxiety, and it will take you nowhere. That is simply the way the human mind, and by extension, human civilization works. Other conditions, however, limit even at the present day the area of a cabinet government. It must be possible to have not only a legislature, but to have a competent legislature. A legislature willing to elect and willing to maintain an efficient executive. And this is no easy matter. It is indeed true that we need not trouble ourselves to look for that elaborate and complicated organization which partially exists in the House of Commons, and which is more fully and freely expanded in plans for improving the House of Commons. We are not now concerned with perfection or excellence, we seek only for simple fitness and bare competency. The conditions of fitness are two. First, you must get a good legislature, and next, you must I'm sorry. It is fantastically ironic that we are reading this today when literally last week or I should say this week's edition of The Economist, the newspaper formed by Walter Bagehot, who I am reading right now. This week, The Economist has talked about the fact of like who killed Britain, who killed Imperial Britain, right? And it's just it's interesting to think about it, right? Because technically, if Britain had followed what Bagehot was saying here, and instead of just fudging it for the past 150 years, we wouldn't have ended up with Bojo. Absolutely not, right? Like it's just we wouldn't have. This is the other thing that is just like it's pure comedy to me. It's like Theresa May did such a bad job as PM, and the Conservative Party was so lucky that Labour decided to elect Jeremy Corbyn as opposed to someone more moderate. If Labour had gotten anyone but Corbyn into that opposition seat, Theresa May's government wouldn't have survived, and that's just such a it's just such an interesting quirk of history. Anyway, and then we wouldn't have had Bojo. It's true. Anyway, let's continue. These are conditions. It is indeed true that we need not trouble ourselves. House of Commons, we are not now concerned. The conditions of fitness, you must get a good legislature, and next, you must keep it good. And these are by no means so nearly connected as might be thought at first. To keep a legislature efficient, it must have a sufficient supply of substantial business. If you employ the best sort of men to do nearly nothing, they will quarrel with each other about that nothing. Where great questions end, little parties begin. And a very happy community, with few new laws to make, few old bad laws to repeal, and but simple foreign relations to adjust, has great difficulty in employing a legislature. There's nothing for it to enact, nothing for it to settle. Accordingly, there is great danger that the legislature, being debarred from all other kind of business, may take to quarreling about its elective business, that controversies as to ministries may occupy all its time, and yet that time be perniciously employed, that a constant succession of feeble administrations, unable to govern and unfit to govern, may be substituted for the proper result of cabinet government, a sufficient body of men long enough in power to evince their sufficiency. The exact amount of non-elective business necessary for Parliament which is to elect the executive cannot, of course, be formally stated. There are no numbers and no statistics in the theory of constitutions. All we can say is that a Parliament with little business, which is to be as efficient as a Parliament with much business, must be, in all other respects, much better. An indifferent Parliament may be much improved by the steadying effect of grave affairs, but a Parliament which has no such affairs must be intrinsically excellent, or it will fail utterly. I was trying to reach for something and pull the muscle. I just need to note this down. Give me 1 second. Tweet this. There we go. I will tweet this later, and then we can talk about it later. It's true though, right? Like that's the reason why I laughed, which is where are we? That a constant succession of feeble administrations, unable to govern and unfit to govern, may be substituted for the proper result of cabinet government. And really, between Bojo, Liz, and now Rishi, what are we doing? Right? Come on. Anyway, moving on. But the difficulty of keeping a legislature good is evidently secondary to the difficulty of first getting it. There are two kinds of nations which can elect a good parliament. The first is a nation in which the mass of people are intelligent and in which they are comfortable. Where there is no honest poverty, where education is diffused and political intelligence is common, it is easy for the mass of the people to elect a fair legislature. The ideal is roughly realized in the North American colonies of England and in the whole free states of the Union. In these countries, there is no such thing as honest poverty. A physical comfort such as the poor cannot imagine here is there easily attainable by healthy industry. Education is diffused much and is fast spreading. Ignorant emigrants from the old world often prize the intellectual advantages of which they are themselves destitute, and are annoyed at their inferiority in a place where rudimentary culture is so common. The greatest difficulty of such new communities is commonly geographical. The population is mostly scattered, and where population is sparse, discussion is difficult. But in a country very large, as we reckon in Europe, a people really intelligent, really educated, really comfortable would soon form a good opinion. No one can doubt that the New England states, if they were a separate community, would have an education, a political capacity, and an intelligence such as the numerical majority of no people equally numerous has ever possessed. In a state of this sort, where all the community is fit to choose a sufficient legislature, it is possible, it is almost easy to create that legislature. If the New England states possessed a cabinet government as a separate nation, they would be as renowned in the world for political sagacity as they now are for diffused happiness. This is actually very interesting and very true. New England was at one point the envy of the world because of the ability for everyone who, well, let's not say everyone, but for most people to get a decent education, and there was always enough demand to stimulate supply of labor, to form new companies, to form new industries, right? And so there was a time in the where the rich of New York and Boston were considered, and all along New were considered really a beacon, and which was obviously give us your tired, give us your poor, whatever, that kind of stuff. The structure of these communities is indeed based on the principle of equality, and it is impossible that any such community can wholly satisfy the severe requirements of a political theorist. In every old community, its primitive and guiding assumption is at war with truth. But its theory, all people are entitled to by its theory, all people are entitled to the same political power, and they can only be so entitled on the ground that in politics they are equally wise. But at the outset of an agricultural colony, this postulate is as near the truth as politics want. There are in such communities no large properties, no great capitals, no refined classes. Everyone is comfortable and homely, and no one is at all more. Equality is not artificially established in the new colony, it is established. It establishes itself. There is a story that among the first settlers in Western Australia, some who were rich took out laborers at their own expense, and also carriages to ride in. But soon they had to try if they could live in the carriages. Before the masters' houses were built, the laborers had gone off. They were building houses and cultivating land for themselves, and the masters were left to their carriages. Whether this exact thing happened, I do not know, but this sort of thing has happened 1,000 times. There have been a whole series of attempts to transplant to the colonies a graduated English society, but they have always failed at that first step. The root classes at the bottom felt they were equal to or better than the delicate classes at the top. They shifted for themselves and left the gentlefolk to shift for themselves. The base of the elaborate pyramid spread abroad, and the apex tumbled in and perished. In the early ages of an agricultural colony, whether you have political democracy or not, social democracy you must have, for nature makes it and not you. But in time, wealth grows and inequality begins. A and his children are industrious and prosper. B and his children are idle and fail. If manufacturers on a considerable scale are established and most young communities strive even by protection to establish them, the tendency to equality is intensified. The capitalist becomes a unit with much and his laborers a crowd with little. After generations of education, too, there arise varieties of culture. There will be an upper thousand, 10,000 of highly cultivated people in the midst of a great nation of moderately educated people. In theory, it is desirable that this highest class of wealth and leisure should have an influence far out of proportion to its mere number. A perfect constitution would find for it a delicate expedient to make its fine thought tell upon the surrounding cruder thought. But as the world goes, when the whole of the population is as instructed and as intelligent as in the case I was supposing, we need not care much about this. Great communities have scarcely ever, never save for transient moments, been ruled by their highest thought. And if we can get them ruled by a decent, capable thought, we may be well enough contented with our work. We have done more than could be expected, though not all which could be desired. At any rate, an isocratic polity, a polity where everyone votes and where everyone votes alike, is, in a community of sound education and diffused intelligence, a conceivable case for cabinet government. It satisfies the essential condition. There is a people able to elect a parliament, able to choose. But suppose the mass of people are not able to elect, and this is the case with the numerical majority of all but the rarest nations. How is a cabinet government to be then possible? It is only possible in what I may venture to call differential nations. It has been thought strange, but there are nations in which the numerous unwiser part wishes to be ruled by the less numerous wiser part. The numerical majority, whether by custom or by choice, is immaterial. Is ready, is eager to delegate its power of choosing its ruler to a certain select minority. It abdicates in favor of its elite, and consents to obey whoever that elite may confide in. It acknowledges as its secondary electors, as the choosers of its government, an educated minority, at once competent and unresisted. It has a kind of loyalty to some superior persons who are fit to choose a good government, and whom no other class opposes. A nation in such a happy state as this has obvious advantages for constructing a cabinet government. It has the best people to elect to a legislature, and therefore it may fairly be expected to choose a good legislature competent to elect a good administration. This is going to be fun. England is the type of differential countries, and the manner in which it is so and has become so is extremely curious. The middle classes, the ordinary majority of educated men, are in the present day the despotic power in England. Public opinion, nowadays, is the opinion of the bald-headed man at the back of the omnibus. It is not the opinion of the aristocratical classes as such, or of the most educated or refined classes as such. It is simply the opinion of the ordinary mass of educated but still commonplace mankind. If you look at the mass of constituents, you will see that they are not very interesting people. And perhaps if you look behind the scenes and see the people who manipulate and work the constituencies, you will find that these are yet more uninteresting. The English constitution in its palpable form is this. The mass of the people yield obedience to a select few, and when you see this select few, you perceive that though not of the lowest class, nor of an unrespectable class, they are yet of a heavy, sensible class. The last people in the world to whom, if we were to drawn up in a row, an immense nation would ever give an exclusive preference. In fact, the mass of the English people yield a deference rather to something else than to their rulers. They defer to what we may call the theatrical show of society. A certain state passes before them, a certain pomp of great men, a certain spectacle of beautiful women. A wonderful scene of wealth and enjoyment is displayed, and they are coerced by it. Their imagination is bowed down, they feel they are not equal to the life which is revealed to them. Courts and aristocracies have the great quality which rules the multitude, though philosophers can see nothing in it. Visibility. What? Oh, yes, okay. Courtiers can do what others cannot. A common man may as well try to rival the actors on the stage in their acting as the aristocracy in their acting. A higher world, as it looks from without, is a stage on which the actors walk their part much better than the spectators can. This play is played in every district. Every rustic feels that his house is not like my lord's house, his life like my lord's life, his wife like my lady. The climax of the play is the queen. Nobody supposes that their house is like the court, their life like her life, her orders like their orders. There is in England a certain charmed spectacle which imposes on the many and guides their fancies as it will. As a rustic on coming to London finds himself in presence of a great show and vast exhibition of inconceivable mechanical things, so by the structure of our society he finds himself face to face with a great exhibition of political things which he could not have imagined, which he could not make, to which he feels in himself scarcely anything analogous. And here we get to the most fun point of the English Constitution, which is the dignified branch of government as represented by Her Majesty the Queen Victoria. But that is for another day. I kind of feel like when we do these bedtime stories, especially when reading English Constitution or even Lombard Street as we do, I get distracted a lot because all of these lessons we are repeatedly relearning and yet not learning them. Why are we not learning them, guys? Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for watching or listening. In conclusion, please download Firefox, please don't do Chrome. And I shall see all of you tomorrow. And of course, we will end with a wink. Let's end with our left eye today. Wink. Bye now. Bye now.